Hello, Americans. To understand American history, you have to understand how the names of modern countries were forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, uses of them roles, not realizing, and worse than just being forced, hurt, tricked, persuaded to use the names of our own countries or other people's and or the group differences. Tactical ulterior from how nature has and wants us and needs us to use the names of everything. The value of the dictionary is for how our identity is a volume science the way it is. Some of the words have different amounts of definitions for the same word, will have different definitions. There is 1/3/5 identities of the things this is in demonstration of at once, which is simultaneously the identity of three distinctly from how it is, the identity of five, where and how the invisible but still discernible comes with the hyper invisible but still discernible, and where and how languages were revealed to teach this. But summaries of ancient history and of semi ancient history and of modern history, there are collusions with descriptions of and self-defended uses syntactically of descriptions of appearances of justice, of uses of words, all of them individually grouped and together. Words like crimes, where and how predicate acts, methods, not just predicate acts, roles and natures such as wrongdoing itself, criminal enterprises themselves, their difference also implied, the difference between the branches of government our founders left us, regardless of who made up the witch trials. Our founders left us to communicate about that, to use simultaneous correlation about how the three branches of government, their difference, the difference between the private criminal enterprises and the private ones, the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, all roles with all cultural identity treatments and exceptions recorded, used effectively by the breaching method everywhere the species body has a name, but using us through our own, with itself undiscerned, and where and how there are exceptions to that. There are remote uses of self-valued possessions over each individual voice, even a leader, no matter how powerful they could get. They're being forced to entertain or self-value, and the difference of that too exploited, and exceptions exploited simultaneously by the breaching method that it, in other words, the individual voice has prevented the treatment of finite details and their significance, like that and how nature shows us that the real history of Native Americans and of Europeans and of the people of the world, we came through self-valued roles with descriptions of history that were collusions, where and how it's not just a shell game, it's with exceptions too. In other words, like a shell game, I mean like two fake sides, two people fighting with each other or two people pretending to like each other, where others from off location are involved with planting evidences and also off location of that. It's not complicated, it's just extensive. So natural assignments of the human identity of value/value progression being reassigned. So I tried to ask in the comment section of I don't know Judge Napolitano with Judging Freedom YouTube channel. But I tried to ask Fox News when he was with Fox News and since, because they have his uses of his Facebook page. And there are lawyers also, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his lawyer, Robert Cheverry, and co-defendants of his. Thaddeus Grabowski, for example, is involved with names on all Fox Connecticut News and the locations next to them. Involved where and how. There are a whole bunch of distinct natures of organized crime, roles, and roles legitimately with that per. Like, for example, a Kyle Gill, real or made up. If there was really, he was already recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Involved with people from Weathersfield into Branch, who are involved with criminally foreign influence uses of prosecutors and judges remotely criminally foreign influence. People involved with prisons of kids and of adults who have crimes with roles with forensics locations, who have roles. There's a hyper forensic trail of Connecticut rolls with the World Trade Center attack names and the names next to it too, for how this breaching method used originally and still. Our database relativity to each individual and group difference, each voicing for humanity, where the human species body volume, individual body of individual bodies, per just like the other species bodies, individual group differences, male, female, age, sex, location. And the value of that, which is one of the reasons, one of the ways. The hyper invisible describes, shows us to describe and appreciate how it has distinct identities of itself as distinct identities of sequence / simultaneous nature. As the hyper invisible but still discernible that the other animals that have eyes like us, quality aspects of nature like us, as a species body, not as our own though. They are distinct identities of sequence / simultaneous nature, individually grouped together. And that has variable relativity with subject treatments. And we could only make them in this system that has over every individual part grouped and together. How it is three distinct but also non-distinct volume sciences and demonstration of the identity of relativity, the identity of hyperrelativity too, which is the / hyperrelativity, which is both the difference of its identity of relationship to itself, and is simultaneously the value of that, as they're also grouped distinctly. And so there is one identity of simultaneous that not our species volume can be, and the other species volumes can be. But together we have a shared consciousness, distinctly, non-distinctly, and hyper simultaneously. See, but unlike the other creatures, they don't self-value. The science is the syntax of humanity being and having been abridged fact, treatment, nature, quality, aspects in nature. That was propagated as hypercriminal insidiousness natures because it replaced what everyone wanted and needed to communicate. Tactically maintained, measured and maintained. Everyone countering that as collusions. We're countering it correctly or that relative to instances and not, and the difference of that too. See, Boolean logic and defenses of it can only get away with themselves if quoting statutes and precedents that are not real statutes and precedents, but they are used as such because of the time treatment, where and how we can't leave out how the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the interbranch and or the exceptions tied to them, and or the insidiousness of people A through Z. We have to look for simultaneously where everyone was wrong together for the breaching method. And there are means to discern this by having black pupils, whites of eyes, exceptions and exception nature. The second we heard about slavery and things like that, we knew people were being dishonest about that. And when they were trying to be honest, that would cause things any honest kid has me. Excuse me, let me press this thing off so it doesn't beep. So American history has been taught tactically wrong. Everyone had been child abused by a real sick method that was juxtaposed with everything bad and good as collusions with its identity theft, fraud, slander method. Any identity, anything invisible but still discernible, anything that's real, like a subject, even if it's made up. In other words, it is a subject. Anything, even if that's something is made up, all parts of itself have the identity of hyperrelativity, of hyperreality, and demonstration to it. See, emotions served a function to the ancients, where if descriptions of them were only to leave out the smallest finite detail, or for others to, or the value of what is simultaneous, or the value of how things are positive or negative relative to systems other than the hyperrelativity, the one we know is actually true always. It shows us there is a scientific need to appreciate a distinct identity of simultaneous nature that comes with appreciation of where and how being an individual is being a distinct identity of simultaneous nature, as being a sequence nature is. A sequence nature is a distinct identity of simultaneous nature, where and how the individual, the group, and the simultaneous are bound with the slash hypersimultaneous. If I said if I said it's the simultaneous and the hypersimultaneous, that's two volumes of this is three at once. This is five while being five as the singular identity of a cell body. Invisible but still discernible. Conjunction to five identities of how it is five distinct identities of simultaneous nature slash sequence nature, and how that is differentially hyperrelative to where how nature demonstrates it is making more and more forever nature through temporary space nature. That as more and more individual identities of infinity nature because of how its value progression, its identity of forever nature began and stayed, or was and stayed, because only how it was and stayed is observable per correlation's actual means. So a little kid, really young, has means to appreciate how Native Americans were hurt by a system that we don't want naturally, and how we value, because we're told, you don't realize, you're told president slash chief. See, our presidents slash chiefs were for counter extorted by our founders had to counter extort the other founders because and everyone had to lie about their motivations for about why they helped America become America. They had to use the truths as collusions too, self value, because no one was. Oh, but I'm not going to deal with the truth. In other words, it was measured. If anyone deals with the truth, they're sensed and heard through our own. The identities of industries, the only available, because the ground had already been tactically denatured before our founders were born. This had already caused Native Americans to start fighting with Native Americans because now they have to defend fact sheepy nature, quality aspect, and nature that while that's being prevented. And well, I have to do it anyway because nature's forcing it. But they can't talk about that honestly, sickly distinctly from the Europeans who are already enslaved. All the exceptions, like regarding their wealth, and those were also being and are being is being used tactical terror. In other words, everyone's extorted. Even all exception nature also employed self-value uses syntactically tactical terror from how nature uses exception nature, which is hyper forensically recorded. So to speak, there are means to appreciate the hyper evidential, and there are means to observe definitions and uses of them that already can't defend logic roles with that, identity of logic roles with that, and also at the same time. The equality nature of debate at other places is increasingly self-valued at all formal locations. Where and how it is actually more, so we can't forgiveness is so we don't leave out the breaching method. We could agree to do damage control. We're already in positions. People claiming that it's good enough. In other words, people claiming, oh, we have to do this. The negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures in the suburbs were caused by the breaching method, the difference between the suburbs and how they're mixed with the cities. These were syntactical employments by a breaching method that was simultaneously making employments as we know and communicate about them, while it effectively measured and maintained its employments left out. Itself, the breaching method, a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. I'm not even a lawyer. Nature shows us needs to counter a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise with the A.K.A. Act, anti-hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise Act. And this conceives syntactically modern countries A through Z, being and having been used remotely, simultaneously pretending other, while being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influence slash hyper criminally foreign influence, 3 ways. And relative where and how we are syntactically manifest. And with and as the difference of where and how we are also voice slash voicing for the other species bodies that we are not, but we are anyway. Because of the identity that is every volume is its own system. Hyper native pure. We all lost that hyper native education. How the value of the ground being and having been tactically denatured below Native American feet has conjunction to every subject has relativity where and how. That, in other words, even nature uses to communicate the appearance of where it is discernible how the subjects share an identity, how they share relativity. Look how math works. Relativity is not a theory. The value of if someone read or not, and you know, defensive descriptions of behavior. This was employed. Our founders who had to counter extort the other founders, and the Constitution unabridged with Marbury versus Madison hyper additional value to that because of how we are hyper additional value to and as the Republic's ground did means of evolution science that has been criminally foreign influence since semi-ancient times. When the names of the human species body, individuals grouped, and differences were forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to be ignored, hid, and lied about relative to investigations and investigators. For example, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, insidiousness of the logic of people A through Z, where how they were forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to hurt themselves, pretending they could speak for things like what's practical. For example, there are a whole bunch of people use, including politicians, use the phrase deep state. I believe what Bob Woodworth might have been one of the people associated with the first use of that. See, but not one president's name can be used properly until we have the extortion of George Washington that Hastings tactically asked us to deal with honestly. And that comes with the tortures of him and the other founders. And also how distinctly from our founders were sickly, distinctly tortured and extorted grouped ways, tortured grouped ways, consciously by a breaching method. And so we have each modern country that can agree simultaneously to write a nature of statutes and to use them that is superior to even military statutes. All formal and informal precedents we know hyper-evidentially recorded. There is a hyper-evidential trail that people who pretended to speak for honesty left out the significance of how the hyper-evidential exists. For example, how it is not evidences as known. Because we'll examine too, Interbranch has been faking evidences into databases at the same time with names on all sides of criminal and of civil cases, their lawyers, their victims, and the victims' advocates appointed by the courts. They're switching names and stuff as collusions with crime scene / hyper crime scene since founding. See that breaching method forced roles with all these sick roles with itself. Those were all crime scenes roles. That was increasingly roles with its method by that. By counters to it, the difference of that. It measures and maintains for motivations, means other than our own. Like when they pretend their motivations, when they pretend integrity by mental health and or descriptions of people involved with incidences, increasingly where they're reliant upon the other police forms. See, the intelligence community has roles with their family members, therefore off the records, when they have their kids associated with schools or family members placed working at schools. where and how conversations at each age of fact treatment nature were effectively used to maintain certain type of victim slash hyper victim as the as the 15 distinct identities of criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and or negative treatments, where and how appreciation of how nature communicates with difference. And for example, with the only increasing value scientific with the scientific discernment of the hyper simultaneous being a distinct identity of simultaneous nature, which none of the other creatures of consciousness have. But are anyway. And wherever the slightest bit of the hyper simultaneous is, as a subject, or that can be discerned, the extent of it that can be discerned, even if it's the slightest bit, from every finite detail, it is inseparable three ways, grouped ways. And the species volume science simultaneously slash hyper simultaneously. So this has reactions to where and how it employs descriptions of instances and of names, incapable of affording discernment of use slash S of that at databases tied locations, and or also for the use of the difference, where they're sticking criminally foreign influenced motivations, narratives, and appearances, while as roles with predicate acts with facts methods. So with the assassination of President Kennedy, reported, even if it was made up, where they reported it from the book depository. See, book depositories have rolled with that breaching method that would use everyone from abroad, but through our own. In other words, if someone sends someone trying to counter roles against anyone black or white, per the descriptions of that, notice how they make the Native Americans defend blaming it on a white man when they are white. In other words, I didn't really get to sun this summer. I still haven't had a response for what I caught them doing with the principal child abuser and other leaders of the kids. These are also people involved with abuses of people who got arrested through their probation officers, who had roles with relative shootings at the time. There's probation officers involved with Mike Oliver, a boxer, and people involved with John Scully, a former boxer, people involved with the boxing community, boxing gyms, where judges and prosecutors avert criminal enterprises, private ones, and people with campuses have been putting fake things in databases, roles with news, planting evidences, identity theft, fraud, slanders. This is uses of each age and nature of campus. Forgiveness is also to allow someone to show the breaching method and where and how it is recorded, how people could be motivated to leave out what's hyper and get away with it, pretending nature of debate or an honest person dealt with how the value nature systems left out a whole bunch of distinctions. In other words, so logistically, per location, people are sickly distinctly being and haven't been hurt. Even the fake exceptions, they mixed how they hurt people just if they're black or white, where it's concentrated most discernible, the breaching method rolls with the tortures, the extortion methods grouped, and the slavery method against everyone, including our founders. and including why and how they had to counter extort the other founders. So incapable, and everyone had to. In other words, everyone's narrative and roles with the revolution was measured and maintained by roles with it against themselves there already too. See how little England is, how it was capable of controlling the whole world because they're being extorted as an individual. No matter how powerful a leader could get, locations, areas, states, uses of criminally foreign influence, positive treatments that are collusions with the negative treatments, like the World Trade Center attack, effectively used to simultaneously collusions with all narratives regarding the positives tied to it. So there are things called monopolies. There's also a hyper monopoly. And there's also uses of people pretending not to realize, even though this is hyper forensically recorded. So our presidents distinctly they communicated to us to distinctly from how they communicated to the news, states news and federal news. I mean, interstates news and international news. They are individually grouped in together with connections, with campuses, and the difference of that. So it's also exploited at their homes, next to their homes, next to the corners of streets, next to the people there. Oh, I heard this. Then this person drove by. They lock their sense and sensibilities, to use Jane Austen's phrase. People pretending to be able to speak about for integrity or for passions and emotions honestly, for truths, for positive things or for negative things, for crimes. People speaking about crimes are recorded roles with predicate acts much worse. Also with predicate acts methods was much worse than people of all ages they've been putting in to prisons as collusions with the crime scene /S, which relative to where and how they have predicate acts with facts methods, uses of planting fake motivations for what, why, and how actually. There are connections between each campus I went to where they attach everyone to faked and changed words and totally made up. And as fake ties, fake natures of ties to other people that are increasingly being exploited intercities, interstates, timed uses of it. People weren't even in my class when I became old enough, before I was in third grade, to discern how and to communicate better than they do now, adults. How you could appreciate by looking how simultaneously, sickly, distinctly each volume of humanity's difference was sickly, distinctly being prevented, quality of fact treatment nature, that we are actually capable of being and revealing means by. See, evolution science does only feel like games, or else we should sense. See, but we have why and how we had to entertain economic positions, leaving out the significance, the value, let alone just the value I mean, the value is only increasing of Native Americans. How sickly distinctly they were prevented rights and descriptions of it honestly from the colonists, and they would all have to pretend other, not realizing that even when they're fighting with each other, not realizing what the real motives were, because too all these additional motivations are being stacked. Or we're trying to make wealth. This is used to measure and maintain, entertained sickly distinctly by the Republicans and the Democrats, possession over the individual voice, no matter what it is, They try to, in other words, the president told us distinctly from the news, knows too. They are forced to lie because they demonstrated there's a quality of fact human nature. There's a quality of uses of people's names and the value of that is only used to force a quality of fact human nature that is incapable of defending its identity of logics, variables and constants uses, opinions, theories, and convictions, and of affording defenses to things like criminal foreign influences / hypercriminal foreign influences. So this breaching method employed criminally foreign influenced identities of industries, be clearer than day, is one of the things that slavery was hyper forensically, therefore, in demonstration of. It is distinctly what is simultaneously from what is hyper simultaneous, not just showing us the increasing value of the discernment of how it is a simultaneous nature, distinctly from ourselves, but also non distinctly. And again, the value of that is only increasing. The rewards by descriptions of that properly, which is to yourself and to others, and with exceptions. And exception nature, how it uses it as the subject, as simultaneous. So the answer /S of what to do regarding the worst things is right here. It's right here for us to, we have this method natural to show us the answer. The worst negatives that are means to cause positives that are not criminal and seditious natures of positives. Roles with the worst negatives, like the World Trade Center attack and the resulting wars. That came from semi-ancient times. We're recorded now. There are self-valued uses of naive descriptions of what was probably and demonstrably value then. This nature of politics, what they call debate, logic, integrity, that's not what revealed the republic for which we stand. That came from ancient times before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced in semi-ancient times. That came before even modern religions. It is also hyper-evidentially recorded, where and how they are demonstrably having demonstrated for us to be honest about that. In other words, the fact, human nature, quality, aspects, nature, everyone was criminal and seditious is used remotely as all formal identities of law. Before the foundation of modern countries, each more vast and yes, more deep. A human fact, human nature breaching method, program, all identity of the ground location, /S, as a value progression, /S, as the human volume science, /S, as individual / group differences, / human value only increasing simultaneously. That's why and how, that's what the discernment of uses of words like humanity. See, we have to discern when people speak for humanity, where and how this has been gotten away with, the significance of the hyper evidential denied voice, free speech. So you have everyone has white eyes. So the second, if you're white, The second you hear laws against black or white, because we have black pupils, we know there's a breaching method. There's a system tactical ulterior from that, which is hyper native pure. Each modern country needs to make a hyper tribe. If they have an indigenous population, we have to make 3 hyper tribes. And for them, and hand it off. In other words, we have to, in other words, we need more than trust. We need more than, see, people go, oh, it's actions or it's trust. And the difference of that, Boolean logic, leaving out how nature uses exception, hyper additional from, well, distinctly, but also non-distinctive from any way we could be. It's part of it. Its system's part of itself, the hypernated pure. That possession slash hyperpossession. In other words, where its complete identity of volume is not. Like your complete identity, where it is the parts of the cell of your body, like a cell, like the cells together, part of your body. This is semi-nature relationship to your complete identity being greater than it and more finite than it at the same time. Even though, in other words, even though it's more finite than you could deal with your own self, but one way. But by what is also greater than what we can't invent it. In other words, there's a difference between causing positive value nature progressions, acts and natures that are criminal insidiousness natures of them, and causing ones that are also positive hype all ways itself. This is where evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere come, including where and how we are factory with nature. So modern countries with the phenomenon of nuclear weapons, not to say all weapons are part of this logic. We're going to change the whole identity by just picking one because we could see all the sciences share an identity. See these sciences. If you have a peaceful nuclear, defined through contrast to nuclear weapons, and the difference of that state criminal insidious nature is positive and used as collusions, for example, self-value, where how those different streammates can't afford defenses of that syntactically, legally, and proper defenses of ourselves from criminal insidiousness slash hyper criminal insidiousness. That employed from some ancient times self-valued roles with uses of the names of the human species body, tactical ulterior from how nature employed them, and will only employ them. Or we'll lose Earth's a special difference, our special difference, and the grouped value of that. Earth has an individual difference relative to all the other grouped and simultaneous parts of space. There are proofs that humanity caused bacteria to be alive in space now, because relative to where and to how Earth's value through ourselves is being forced away these of ideas. There are proofs that the ancients would have defined these of ideas as forced space nature transfer, and nature being one of the words we use for our identity, the same reason we have 5 names for a verb. How there is an infinitive, which is a phrase note, not a name. That is an exception that appears to be in demonstration of other, but it's exception it's involved with how it uses exception nature, really in demonstration of the same thing. And this is about where and how also it shows us how more and more forever nature is being made and how to describe this properly. There are proofs that we need to make, if it's not already revealed. A math symbol with as a triangle with the infinity symbol inside of it. The identity of the value progression of every circuit of every program is simultaneously greater than and more finite than itself, distinctly, while it is non-distinctly where and how it has identity of identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that simultaneously, equally only increasingly value. It is the phenomenon of being the identity of three distinct identities of zero. Because because it's three distinct identities of invisible but still discernible, slash hyper invisible but still discernible. Again, where and how it shows us its identity of volume, its identity of volume's identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. And how it does this is how each identity has relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. It is more discernible with the hyper invisible, but still discernible associated with languages than it is with the gases, like oxygen. But that is too invisible, but still discernible. Relativity to positive and negative. And to their identity of relationship to itself. So grouped ways too. So the mixture of carbon gases and oxygen, not just a mixture of it. What this shows us simultaneously is appreciation of how it is all things simultaneously, dis, uh, uh, distinctly from how it is itself hyper simultaneously. It is a part of itself that is increasingly coming here that has not come yet. But to an extent, we already know. It's here, it's already coming, it's already valued now. See, this breaching method made the suburbs tactically denatured to cause negative value nature progressions, action nature before our founders were even born. That was sustained. Native Americans against Native Americans, colonists against colonists, and the difference too. The unity between the Native Americans and colonists, and or the fights between them, and the difference between that, also employed by the breaching method. Also, it knew that nature would increasingly demonstrate to each identity of correlation nature. There's a breaching method involved. So we could, in other words, think of countries. If we all agreed together, see, countries have to yell at each other and threaten each other, and they even kill each other because because certain type of victim slash hyper victim predator slash hyper predator who was prevented equality of fact treatment nature since everyone was kids relative to where and to how all location slash s and each one next to it too for the difference of that. This method effectively uses self-value descriptions of emotions and of instances and of names by people to measure and maintain. Roles pretending other, but communicating and having communicated, or having other than was pretended before. Also, the instances that are brought before courts, for example, where we're not supposed to separate their roles. See, this breaching method measured and maintained. What's entertained as suburbs can only cause negative is an identity of the grounds, identity of relationship to itself as nature, that's going to demonstrate negative value nature, progressions, acts, and natures. And this is where and how we are its syntactical possession / hyperpossession. And this is where and how our founders, sickly distinctly from ourselves, they are still forced to pretend they self-entertained roles with the breaching methods, torture methods, extortion methods, slavery methods, and pretending others simultaneously. Evidential treatments, hyper-evidentially recorded, criminally foreign influence, used remotely, pretending other, not just that formal location, increasingly that other location. Not with you differentially that or the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, and or juxtapose the insidiousness of the identities of logic A through Z relative to the communications of our founders, being and having been replaced by the breaching method to measure and maintain that self-value, or through a hyper additional reasons from its own, measuring and maintaining for their own reasons, knowingly for more, but they don't know the extent of it. This was hyper sophistication here before any nature of sophistication pretended they could speak for black or white, or exceptions. So we have means to agree, to help our leaders' voices as each modern country's leaders, to be able to speak about things without people saying they're crazy. Like, in other words, how the economic positions were forced to measure and maintain that pretend did not realize by everyone. That's one of the things that those crazy laws were forced in, roles with. So our countries individually grouped and together, for example, especially with mental health databases and with their own databases differentially, because it's also especially with crime scenes. They can't afford what goes down properly to be discerned relative to having had roles with all sides in criminal and civil cases, victims and their advocates, and their family members, their campuses, those names involved with where and how everyone's used remotely, and or that person's senses through our own. That's what's hyper-evidentially recorded. When people deny the significance of the hyper-evidential, where and how the black pupils, whites of eyes, an exception nature as being used by the nature's communications is replaced, and how that is gotten away with. That's part of how we could discern the method. You can't describe the cracker without describing his slavery too. That's a sick person on all sides. Is only allowed. Otherwise, that person's sentenced. And if they're silent, it's roles too, because everyone's attached to faked and changed words. Had honesty spoke for the law, which each person is a voice of the law. Even if I'm not a police form, not a judge, not a prosecutor. I caught them roles since they were kids, certain type of victim / hyper victim. Everyone attached to fake words and fake ties to each other, fake dangerous ties to each other. Where and how this uses to keep the overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and the difference between that and the three branches of government and the exceptions tied to them, used to screen and keep blaming on other things other than ourselves, what it does, and how it gets away with it. So people on Covington Street in New Britain recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have roles with people named O'Brien with Hartford Police Departments and Newington Police Departments, also associated with the name Cololo, involved with wire crimes with Wethersfield Police that are timed collusions with state police forms interstates and military police forms foreign and domestic. Whole bunch of countries on off all the campuses I went to, even ones they didn't go to. In other words, I went to one that I don't think they went to. In other words, and then they're putting fake things in databases and connections between people with the intelligence community recorded how kept used remotely criminally foreign influence. Then they and also their narratives about their responses when they hear that is also used remotely criminally foreign influence. They brought this up. The intelligence community brought this up. Increasingly, people from Central Connecticut State University have roles with ties to a Ray Reynolds, who was they took my picture around him or whatever, pretended I knew him, made fake exceptions. Also had his roles with the Joshua Julian, people associated with the Joshua Julian, who I don't know at all, who had his name repeated to me by Mark Violet and a Ray Collo, where and how they were involved with wire crimes with an O'Brien family and people on off Central Connecticut State University involved with child abusers, leaders of the kids, and with names involved in elderly homes at the same time. And people on off the state judicial branch offices, on off the state corrections offices and next to it, increasingly roles with predicate acts with facts, tricks stuck into databases. As roles increasingly tied between people, names on all sides in criminal and civil cases, the victims, their advocates, the lawyers, and names of the court sticking sequence shifts, fake things into databases, switching names. See, this is an identity theft, fraud, slander method role. That's one of the things too. Manifest nature tells us to communicate was entrenched here, and it is entrenched here, North and South states, because we also have not addressed syntactically how northern and southern colonies were sickly, distinctly tortured, extorted, grouped ways, and enslaved. Tortured grouped ways, and enslaved grouped ways. Our founders left us to demonstrate this relative to how they sickly, distinctly from ourselves were this way, tortured, extorted, and enslaved. They use the word extortion to begin with, but we're told to do this honestly. And note how the Old Testament says only right here, this part right in the beginning. This is the only part people have to understand up to, where the people of the sciences will come together. It means hyper additionally too, where the identity of the sciences come together. And where Howard uses where it appears where some things appear to be exceptions in exception nature. It is really in demonstration same thing slash S, but this relative to where and how it leads the conversation slash S. In other words, the nature of debate has quality aspects in nature of collusion with theaters, fake motivations pretended for speech. One of the reasons how they get away with preventing mandated law while pretending to be for it. That's one of the things also hyper-evidentially recorded associated with all readings of statutes of precedent of the law. Like see, I teach us things belong. So follow mandated law. I caught them with more people tied to a principal child abuser who had roles with medical families, putting fake things in databases, also with the news. News locations have roles in relationships with campuses and with the intelligence community and as in foreign countries, criminally foreign influence their family members. Certain nothing personal. This is where how they put people in fake conversations with each other, and where how you can't get a response, so you have to speak this. So they won't put anything in writing because they pretend fake motivations about um, privacy, wants and needs for privacy, So modern pastry has people associated with a John Mayano, and his family is involved with child offenders, including medical and foreign and domestic, and with remote uses of prosecutors and of judges and of people that work around them, and to involve with predicate acts of facts, even uses, even of there's something to do with football coaches and different coaches of sports used to where they use the sensibilities of everyone to lock everyone leaving and hiding details, where and how they employed the identities of the hierarchies of states and interstate, federal, even former director of the FBI, criminally foreign influence, uses of it, fake integrity. Our founders left us to use other for correlation nature in our syntax. So it's nothing personal with the name Colo. They brought it up. Make the Wethersfield police get on paper. Also with Bob Chase. So brought this up in his confessions that there's a Phil Colo involved with federal evidences crimes with him, with a principal child abuser. Before they got caught, they were putting fake things in databases. They also have medical corruption with various natures of courts involved with their patients and criminals before they got caught, and crimes against innocent people, therefore, increasingly. Formerly at the locations involved with them criminally, Whiting Forensics has been involved with the leaders of kids and people associated with their kids intimately in other ways, where that's used to exploit other people. As names involve timed roles with overt criminal enterprises and private ones when I was a kid, and then again as an adult, at locations and online as collusions with the people on all sides in criminal and civil cases, lawyers, victims, and their advocates, and with the interbranch forging and switching names. These are also names from Connecticut who did this in the World Trade Center attack context and the Ninth Circuit Court right next to it. And they have roles with this in Miami courts, Orlando, Florida. Intelligence has roles with Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved with a whole bunch of people in Wethersfield that have roles with predicate acts with him and with overt criminal enterprises, child offenders before they got caught, overt criminal enterprises, not legitimately with unmarked police forms. Has something to do with their roles with the houses on Church Street in Old Wethersfield. WTNH also has roles with the corner of a street there, involved with various natures of planting evidence of predicate acts with names involved with them and with the intelligence next to their location in New Haven, further involved. So we're going to examine how the overt criminal enterprises and the interbranch and the private ones and the insidiousness of people A through Z are kept needing to hide live progressions because they've been used remotely through time together. Fake difference. Also with their fake cultural difference. They should fear God who was the guy who came up to me in the green of New Haven, asked me if I wanted to smoke a thing. And was that one of the spotted people? And Spada, please get the Delaferra family judge guy, what his name is on paper, and the other boyfriends of yours involved. And I never had anything to do with it. You guys made those fake exceptions, and this is increasingly demonstrated involved with your neighbors, involved further with the Dillon families and people that were planting evidences in conversations with my teachers behind my back with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and all this other juxtaposed with the interbranch fakes. In other words, fake ties, fake natures of ties to people. They're lying about our descriptions when we talk about the positive with the past. They jump in and start doing identity thefts and frauds and threats. They get away with it because they have a whole bunch of people tied to this Joshua Schumacher. Also with interreligious spots involved with the religious different religious themed roles with KKK themed, black themed, and Confederate flag themed, military and other exceptions tied to the interbranch. Involved all kinds of medical corruption, a whole bunch of different nations who have police forms who are psychiatrists, involve all kinds of nature of organized crime, not just and the uses of the difference of that too. They have lawyers with the locations relative to this uses of consciously of the they have all sides planted fake. identities of logic, descriptions, syntax descriptions, names descriptions. How they get away with this is how you let them measure and maintain for their own means and needs. Fake sides as collusions, like with sexual medical abuses of the kids, simultaneously pretending to be against it, that Fox News, CNN, MSNBC has. Roles with election crimes, roles pretending passions and emotions as dominion voting, as roles with extortion and slavery of humanity, as roles with criminally foreign influence uses of Weathersfield campuses, Weathersfield election locations, religious locations, and the spots next to every location. They should fear God and fix the fake WFSB news. WFSB recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They're increasingly involved planting evidences on and off campuses and at crime scenes as roles. Have them fix the fake conversations with me and say sorry to the people. They also have roles with people pretending to be against Saudis. They have collusions with them as the ones involved with the World Trade Center attack, including some of the victims and their family members and their neighbors being and having been involved with other natures of organized crime and predicate acts before that. They're not legitimately investigators. Get them on paper now, please. Quick, fast. Vaccines class. We take the countries. So then we could start stacking means. We could start talking to the other countries, the other species bodies. They don't have to have faith in criminal insidious means they'll lock everyone into a positive name. Well, but that's just the way things are. In other words, we could say if you guys would just we'll do 3 things for you. If you help us understand with this breaching method before America was formed, it locked sickly distinctly the North and South. Roles with suburbs designed cause negative value nature progressions acts and natures as a theater, not realizing while only allowed to be fathomed criminal and ceaseless natures of means to cause positive and negatives. Value nature progressions acts and natures as collusions with the negatives. Because of how its identity, the identity is simultaneously, as every identity is, its relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. This is why and how value has relativity to positive and negative into bodies apart from itself because of its inseparable ties to all things, how it communicates. This is being and having been replaced. So see on YouTube about Navajo dreams, and remember that they were forced to fight with each other. We know this because it's not hard to. We know everyone's fighting the human species body's names, including how we are native. Everyone's hyper native, therefore everyone's native. But native and indigenous are no longer the same thing. And the difference of that is being and having been used by the breaching method to measure and maintain all left out with all identities of logic, therefore syntax. Otherwise, that individual or group is sensed. Even a body is a group, even if it's a majority, and that is a hurt and pseudo health. Vaccines. I break fake branches, things, but there is seed. Romulus becomes. That's all I believe. Come on. So in other words, we do a world species body exercise. Any other military exercise would be taxing, costly. This one, just explaining it, can be monetized at every country. We could help ourselves, and we can get help from others from out of nowhere at the same time, and we could discern this and what's happening from it at the same time. We have to admit a nature of injunctive relief / hyper injunctive reliefs and a plan to do this that allows, the ground chaos and or pseudo peace and or criminal insidious natures of peace and or difference of that treatments syntactically. Those are employed simultaneously to keep from being discerned. Its identity to the extent we can discern of it as a subject. Its identity of relation as the hyper subject, as identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that, which is also every subject. That one the value of that, which is not only the discernment of various ways of relativity to, not only is it the discernment of the hyper simultaneous, being a distinct identity of simultaneous nature while not being one. Again, this is where and how we could describe to each other as the ancients did, so we could perfect faster the answers that are proper, and debate nature of debate proper. In other words, mandated law proper. It is hyper evidentially recorded. The only allowed to be stewards of each of the identities of science is abridged self-valued use of that. Who's going to speak for mandated law? Or I speak for mandated law as I'm a judge. They're going to use that truth. Or I'm a police officer. They're going to use that. Or I'm a politician. They're going to use that truth for a lie as collusions. They're going to, or and though the difference with other people's using it, using what they say is truth for lies. Like when they blame things on politics, that's the truth used for a lie. Even the politics wouldn't be the same if we addressed the breaching method. We are being prevented short words. Then they ask people to debate. They have court. There are ways to bring things before courts that are worse than criminally incompetent. In fact, human nature, quality aspects of nature, all kinds of natures of organized crime associated with the people, and physical delusions associated with the people seating the juries, their roles with medical locations. The people with licenses to be journalists using that to get over on people as a, in other words, exactly the opposite. Oh, my oath. The oath is recorded, used for evidence already with all sides in criminal and civil cases. Victims, their advocates, in the court's names, and the interbranch and tied sources. How they have a whole bunch of nations shared on off the campuses is also consciously being and having been exploited. They're not legitimately pretending their integrity. They're not legitimately trying to. They're not legitimately using proofs of people when they say that when they're describing people's good or bad behavior. And this is relative to where and how. There are conscious uses of a whole bunch of different murders that were timed intercities with names involved with that. Not as it appears, increasingly. And there's uses of that with the names next to the campuses too. Please get the Weathersfield Police on paper with the news locations. They have retired and standing, further involved, planting evidence as methods. They use wire crime acts and methods where they fabricate emails and fabricate fake audio and video transcripts over phones. They've been attaching little kids to fake conversations with police forms, where and how they employed the identities of the law with no worse than no integrity, pretending other anyway. Certain type of child abuse, victim predator, hyper predator, the best ones to the worst. And the difference of that also employed sickly, distinctly. That guy, there's a guy, Jordan Peterson, I saw on Fox News, see clips. He's probably one of the nicer guys associated with clinical psychiatry. They're all fakes, though, together, and they hide their collusion use of the locations. Criminal and serious nature of positive negative treatment. A whole bunch of countries share. Wall stacking evidences, fake transcripts into databases, as collusions with crime scenes, overt criminal enterprises, and private ones used to further them worse than their own members furthering them. You should fear God now. See how the border is manifest. Border /S, same reason nature shows us cell body, cell nucleus, cell wall slash S in the invisible but still discernible body of value, reception of gases and of the water and its elements, individually grouped and together too. Ugh! So please, Wethersfield Police Chief Cintron, and 1 year, 1 or more years ago, involved with recorded through time rolls with child abusers at the same houses, as rolls with various natures of drugs and medicine crime, wire crimes, putting fake ties to kids into databases, including Wethersfield Police Department, having other kids change what they say, and using that increasingly as their roles with recorded inseparably tied names on all sides in criminal and civil cases, has something to do with their roles with uses of science teachers and of math teachers, in other words, and where and how sense and sensibilities are being exploited. We will read Jane Austen's Dreams to practice reading Native American dreams and the slavery of our founders, reading their dreams, because that's one of the things is more than a dream. That's one of the things that we know they communicated. They communicated for us to explain the difference between what they communicated and what they said because of where and how the breaching method used what everyone was forced to say or be silent about. If the silence and or if the thing was an inclusion, that's hurt. And everyone's also automatically hurt, sustained hurt, tortured, enslaved for other additional reasons anyway before that. And through that, the difference of that also employed. The breaching method measures and maintains fake integrity, pretending other, fake patriotism nations A through Z, pretending other simultaneously. How do they get away with it? It's recorded. You can't. You have to follow what the little kids were and are actually capable of discerning and voicing, but where and how it will be and is sensed by those involved with the assignments, like of the value of what it is to be a judge or what it is to be a police officer, what it is to be a politician, what it is to be the people associated with them, like the state judicial branch officers, state corrections officers, what it is to be a name that lives next to them, that owns Wethersfield Pizza, people involved with Wethersfield Pizza, involved with the name Vizina, the names Vizina and Stocko, and a whole bunch of other names I don't know, who have roles with child defenders and intelligence community on and off Central Connecticut State University, had roles with people involved with wire crimes with Wethersfield Police and falsified police reports and criminally foreign influence conversations with teachers I had and putting fake ties, nature ties between students into databases, including ones from private schools that come in for little illusions planting roles. And so vaccines, get them on campus. These are people on off the World Trade Center location. There was a guy in where was it Maui that burned down, and he said how he's giving out free mental health location medications, and and the expensive, what is it called, the insulin drug, or what it is, insulin for people with diabetes. So there are proofs that the mental health drugs, in other words, the mental health drugs we are involved with people that are tactically delusions wrought and fabricating fake conversations and ties to little kids and their families, including with the news at the same time and after it. And the difference of that, see, they're getting over on forever nature's course, correlations, which is greater than and more finite than infinities. Where and how? No, this is how the ancients would have taught this. English was revealed to be taught this way. The ancients appreciated difference. Many bread, vaccine. So please follow mandated law. Please, CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News. national/international. I can't get Fox News, Hartford, Connecticut, because these are names involved increasingly with predicate acts at campuses I went to. Has something to do with their roles with Ray Reynolds. Increasingly, people with the name Pandolf, their neighbors, their conjunctions to roads and routes, with names all along it involved with federal evidences, crimes, remote uses of bailiffs with new written superior court, judges, prosecutors, their family members, names with the hallway, their differences as males and female, as roles with child abusers and other natures of organized crime bodies. Increasingly, people walking by and then others film stuff where how they have roles with remote uses of all sides in criminal and civil cases, and the court's roles, and with the victim because the location's actual uses relative. Increasingly, everyone next to everyone. This is what's actually recorded. We have all these revelations. We have these means to agree. We're in a trap. Everyone was forced to entertain roles. We'll see what can admit this. In other words, if following the law shuts down, people can't make a living because the industry gets messed up. So that's why we have to admit these things. That's why we have to work as a species body, at least to do damage control. There's no such thing as capitalism yet. There's no such thing as a free market. Beer! Follow mandate law. It means beer. Boxing. Get me a response for the Connecticut branch with the principal child abuser. I want a response for his confessions and the faked evidence you guys plan to hide and force that. Get the rest of the people involved with this police chief Cintron. If he wants to stay a coward, then get this. Jessica Cintron is brought up by John Mayer anyway. It's too late.